When my daughter-in-law told me to leave, I did something strange. I smiled. Not because I was happy, not because I agreed with her, but because I didn't want anyone to see how much it hurt. The words were still hanging in the air when I looked at my son. I thought he would say something, anything, but he didn't. He just stood there in the living room, quiet, his eyes moving from his wife to the floor. That silence was louder than any cruel words. For a moment, the whole house felt unfamiliar. The same house where I had cooked hundreds of dinners. The same house where I had folded tiny baby clothes for my grandson. The same house where I had once believed I belonged. I picked up my teacup slowly so my hands wouldn't shake. "I understand," I said softly. My daughter-in-law crossed her arms. She didn't look angry. She looked certain. "We think it would be better," she said. "We." That word stayed in my heart like a small stone. I nodded again and looked toward my son. He was still silent. And that was the moment I realized something painful. Sometimes people don't leave you with words. Sometimes they leave you with silence. But before you think this story is only about sadness, let me tell you something important. That day was not the beginning. It was the end of many small moments. Moments that I ignored. Moments that I forgave. Moments when I told myself it will get better. To understand how I ended up standing in my own living room being asked to leave, you need to know a little about my family and about my son. My name is Margaret. I am 63 years old. For most of my life, I believed that if you loved your family enough, everything would work out. I raised my son Daniel alone. His father passed away when Daniel was only 7 years old. I still remember the night I had to explain it to him. He sat on the edge of the bed, holding his favorite toy car, asking questions I didn't know how to answer. "Is Dad coming back?" I held him close and whispered, "No, sweetheart, but we will be okay." And somehow we were. Life was not easy after that. I worked 2 jobs for many years. In the mornings, I cleaned offices in a tall building downtown. At night, I worked in a small grocery store near our neighborhood. Daniel spent many afternoons doing homework at the kitchen table while I cooked simple dinners. Sometimes I was tired. Sometimes I wondered if I was doing enough. But Daniel was a good boy. He always helped me wash the dishes. He always said thank you. When he was 16, he once told me something I never forgot. "I'm going to take care of you one day, Mom." I laughed at the time. "You don't need to take care of me. Just live a good life." And for many years, it felt like he was doing exactly that. Daniel studied hard. He finished college. He found a steady job in an accounting office. The day he told me he wanted to introduce me to someone special, I remember feeling both excited and nervous. Her name was Claire. The first time I met her, she was polite, very polite. She brought a small bouquet of flowers and smiled in a careful way. "Mrs. Harris," she said gently, "Daniel talks about you all the time." I remember thinking she seemed quiet, a little distant, but I told myself that first meetings can be awkward. Daniel looked happy beside her, and that was enough for me. Over the next few years, Claire slowly became part of our lives. They married in a small ceremony at a lakeside chapel. I sat in the front row watching my son promise his future to someone else. It was a strange feeling, not sad, just different. A mother spends many years being the center of her child's world. Then one day, that center shifts. And that is how it should be. At least that is what I always believed. After the wedding, Daniel and Claire moved into a small apartment across town. For a while, everything felt normal. They visited on Sundays. We shared dinners. Claire always thanked me for cooking, but even in those early days, there were small things, small moments that I didn't understand. For example, Claire didn't like when Daniel and I talked about the past. One evening, we were laughing about an old school play where Daniel forgot his lines. Claire suddenly said, quietly, "Some people should focus more on the future." The room became silent. Daniel cleared his throat. I quickly changed the subject. At the time, I told myself it was nothing, just a difference in personality. Years passed. Then one day, Daniel called with exciting news. "Mom," he said, "we're having a baby." I remember sitting down at the kitchen table because my legs suddenly felt weak. A grandchild. The word felt warm inside my heart. When little Noah was born, everything changed again. He had Daniel's eyes, and when he laughed, the whole room felt brighter. Claire looked tired during those early months. Being a new mother is not easy, so I began helping more. I cooked meals, I watched Noah so she could rest. Eventually, Daniel suggested something. "Mom," he said carefully one evening, "why don't you move in with us for a while? It would help a lot." I hesitated at first. I didn't want to be a burden, but Daniel insisted. Claire smiled and nodded politely. "Yes," she said, "it could work." So I packed my things and moved into the small guest room in their house. At first, everything felt peaceful. Mornings were filled with a smell of coffee and baby laughter. I folded laundry. I rocked Noah to sleep. Claire often stayed quiet, but I believed she was simply tired. Still, little changes began to appear. Small things, things that seemed unimportant. But now, when I look back, I realize they were the beginning of something deeper. Claire started correcting the way I helped with Noah. "Please don't hold him like that," she would say. Or, "He shouldn't eat that yet." Her tone was never loud, just firm. I tried to respect her wishes. After all, she was the mother. But sometimes Daniel would smile and say, "Mom raised me just fine." And Claire would become very quiet, a quiet that felt heavy. Then one afternoon, I overheard something. Claire was speaking softly in the kitchen. I wasn't meant to hear it. "I just want our own space," she told Daniel. "I know," he replied. "We'll figure it out." I stepped away before they noticed me. I told myself not to think too much about it. Families need space. I understood that. But slowly, the atmosphere in the house changed. Dinner conversations became shorter. Claire spent more time in the bedroom with Noah. Daniel came home later from work. And sometimes when I walked into a room, the talking stopped. I still believed things would improve. I still believed love was stronger than discomfort. But I didn't realize that one quiet evening, everything would finally come to the surface. And when it did, the words that followed would change the way I understood family forever. The first few weeks of living with them were peaceful, almost routine. I woke early, made coffee, and quietly tidied the apartment before Noah woke. Daniel went to work. Claire stayed home with the baby. I told myself that my presence was helpful, that I was simply a grandmother lending a hand. At first, it seemed like Claire appreciated it. She thanked me for small things, folding clothes, preparing meals, even just keeping Noah occupied for a short while. But slowly, I noticed her expressions changing. A tightness around her mouth, a slight sigh whenever I spoke, a small frown when I offered advice. One morning, as I was feeding Noah his oatmeal, Claire came into the kitchen. She watched me carefully, then said softly, "Margaret, don't put too much milk in his cereal. He'll get sick." I paused, spoon halfway to his mouth. "Oh, okay," I said quietly. It wasn't that I wanted to argue. I just felt a small ache in my chest. It reminded me of the countless times I had done these things for Daniel, and now every action seemed to be measured, judged. Later that day, I tried to talk to Daniel about it. "Do you think I'm doing something wrong with Noah?" I asked cautiously. He looked up from his papers. "No, Mom, you're fine. But Claire, she seems—" Daniel put his hand on mine. "Mom, she's just adjusting. Give her some time." I nodded. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to see the good. But deep down, a small worry began to settle in my heart. Weeks passed, and small things became bigger. Claire started making changes without telling me. She rearranged Noah's room, moved the high chair, even replaced some of the baby's clothes with new ones. She said nothing, just did it. One afternoon, I asked gently, "Claire, did you change Noah's clothes?" "Yes," she said quietly, avoiding my eyes. "I thought these would be better." I nodded, but my mind spun. It wasn't about the clothes. It was the way decisions were made without any conversation. It felt as if I were slowly being pushed to the side. Then came dinner. We were all sitting at the table. I placed the last dish on the counter and said, "I made your favorite tonight, Daniel, roast chicken with vegetables." Claire looked at me for a moment, then said firmly, "I already made dinner. You don't need to cook tonight." I froze. The words weren't harsh, but they carried a weight I couldn't ignore. I looked at Daniel. His eyes flicked toward me, then down to his plate. I felt a lump in my throat, but said nothing. That night, I went to my guest room earlier than usual. I sat on the edge of the bed and thought about how quickly life had shifted. I had moved in to help, not to intrude, yet somehow my help was no longer welcome. The next morning, Claire woke Noah early. I went to the kitchen to prepare breakfast. She walked past me, quietly muttering, "I'll handle it today." And she did. She took over completely. I stayed in the corner, making coffee, trying to fade into the background. It wasn't just meals, it was small moments throughout the day. Noah's bedtime, his bath, even what toys he could play with. I wasn't asked, I was told. I tried to tell myself I was overthinking. Maybe this was normal. New parents often feel protective. But I couldn't shake the growing tension, the quiet looks, the slight sighs, the subtle reminders that I wasn't needed. Then one evening, something happened that made the tension impossible to ignore. Daniel had stayed late at work. I was sitting in the living room with Noah, reading him a story. Claire came in, closed the door quietly behind her, and said, "Margaret, can we talk?" I had put the book down. My heart thumped. I think it's better if you consider moving back to your place," she said softly. The words were gentle, almost polite, but the meaning was clear. I blinked. My mouth went dry. "Move back?" "Yes," she said. "It's not personal. We just want our space, our little family." I wanted to say something, anything, but my voice caught. My hands were trembling. I felt the years of care, the meals cooked, the nights spent rocking Noah slipping away as if they didn't matter. I looked toward Daniel. He was standing silently near the doorway, watching, saying nothing. That silence hurt more than her words. I tried to hold myself together. "I understand," I whispered. Claire nodded. "We'll help you with anything you need to move. I just think this is best." And with that, she walked past me and into Noah's room. I sat there for a long time, staring at the carpet. The house felt emptier than ever. For the next few days, life continued in this quiet tension. Every action I took was measured. Every word I said was careful. Every smile I offered was small, restrained. I tried to talk to Daniel about it. "Son, I didn't mean to intrude. I just thought I could help." He sighed. "Mom, Claire wants her space. It's not your fault. Please, just trust us." I wanted to trust him, I really did, but my heart ached. My son, who had once promised to take care of me, was silent when his wife asked me to leave. That was the beginning of the real conflict. The moments became sharper, quieter, but they cut deeper. Small dinners turned into tense meals. Conversations were avoided. Even Noah seemed to notice the change. I felt invisible, not in the way a person might feel lonely, but in the way you feel when the world you built with your own hands no longer has a place for you. And then, one afternoon, it escalated. I had prepared Noah's favorite cookies. I placed them on a plate, hoping to surprise him. Claire walked in, looked at the plate, and said, "Don't give him too many. He already has a lot of sugar." I smiled faintly. "I just wanted to make him happy." She shook her head. "He doesn't need you making decisions for him." The words stung, sharper than I expected. I realized then that this wasn't about meals or schedules or even baby clothes. It was about control. It was about me not belonging here anymore. And for the first time, the thought crossed my mind, maybe moving in wasn't a good idea. Maybe I had overstepped, even if my intentions were only love. But the love I felt was real, and it hurt to be told, softly, that it was no longer wanted. That evening, I sat alone in the living room. Noah was asleep, Daniel at work, Claire in the bedroom. I felt the house around me, the walls that had once felt welcoming, turning into spaces where I was a guest, not family. I tried to convince myself it was temporary, that Daniel would say something, that Claire would soften. But deep inside, I felt the first true crack in my heart, and I knew, quietly, that the moment when everything changed had arrived. The morning started like any other, but there was a heaviness in the air that I couldn't shake. Noah was playing quietly in the living room, Daniel was getting ready for work, and Claire seemed more distant than usual. She avoided my eyes when she walked past, her footsteps measured, almost rehearsed. I tried to make breakfast. I boiled eggs, toasted some bread, poured coffee. Everything felt mechanical. Every sound seemed louder, every silence deeper. "Margaret," Claire said suddenly, her voice calm but firm, "we need to talk." I froze, my hands gripping the edge of the counter. My heart beat faster. I had been expecting this moment, and yet I wasn't ready. She led me into the living room. Noah was busy with his toys, barely noticing us. Daniel was already there, standing silently, his eyes avoiding mine. "I think it's time for you to move out," Claire said. I blinked. The words had finally arrived in full. No soft warnings, no polite hints, just a statement that left no room for discussion. I took a deep breath. "Move out?" My voice was quiet. "Do you mean now?" Claire shook her head slowly. "We're not asking you to leave immediately, but we need our home back, our family to function as its own unit. It's not personal, Margaret. It's just how it has to be." Daniel's silence was deafening. I looked at him, searching for any sign of support, but there was none. His lips pressed together, his gaze fixed on the floor. I felt a strange mix of anger and sorrow, not the kind that erupts, but the quiet kind that sits heavy in your chest. "Your space? Your family?" I whispered. "I raised you. I was here for you every single day. I cooked for you, cleaned for you, stayed up at night when you were sick, and this is how it ends?" Claire looked uncomfortable but firm. "I know you helped, and I appreciate it, but it's not about gratitude. It's about what's right for our little family now." I could feel tears gathering, but I blinked them back. I didn't want to cry in front of them, not like this. "Daniel," I said, my voice shaking slightly, do you agree with this?" He didn't answer. He didn't move. He just stared at the carpet. That silence, it was louder than any words. I swallowed hard. I wanted to scream, to beg, to cry, but instead I said softly, "I understand." I didn't, not fully, but I couldn't stay in that moment longer. I needed air. I needed space. I went to the guest room, sat on the edge of the bed, and let the tears fall quietly. I thought about all the years I had spent raising Daniel, about the nights I stayed awake worrying, about the sacrifices I made, about every hug, every word of encouragement, and now all of that seemed to vanish in a single statement. The days that followed were unbearable. I packed my things slowly, carefully, as if the act of packing could delay the inevitable. Every drawer, every shelf, every little corner of the room held memories of laughter, of warmth, of love, and yet the room felt empty now. Noah sensed it too. He looked at me with big, innocent eyes that seemed to ask, "Why is everyone so quiet?" I smiled faintly and said, "Mommy and Daddy need a little space, sweetie. Everything will be okay." But it wasn't okay. One evening, after Daniel returned from work, I found the courage to speak again. "Son," I began, my voice steady, "I know this is what Claire wants, but I need to know, do you feel the same?" He didn't meet my eyes. "Mom, I don't want to make things worse. Please try to understand." I felt my chest tighten. That was the moment I realized the depth of the divide. My son, the boy who had once promised to take care of me, was no longer the same person in this home. He loved me, yes, but he was trapped between loyalty to his wife and the mother who had raised him. A week later, Claire set a date. She wanted me to move out by the end of the month. I nodded. "Okay," I said quietly. Inside, a storm raged. I didn't know if it was sadness, anger, or disappointment that weighed heaviest, perhaps all three. But something inside me shifted that day. I realized I couldn't force love, nor could I demand gratitude. I could only choose how to carry myself through this pain. I decided to stay calm, to leave with dignity, to let go of bitterness, even if my heart ached. I started packing in earnest. Each box felt like a small farewell. Each item I placed into a bag carried a memory, a laugh, a tear. And yet, in the quiet moments, I found clarity. I had given my love freely for decades. I had raised a good man. I had nurtured my grandson. That was not erased by one decision, no matter how painful. One evening, as I folded Daniel's old baby clothes to give away, he came into the room. He didn't speak first. He just stood there, looking at the boxes. Finally, he whispered, "Mom, I'm sorry. I should have spoken up." I smiled faintly, placing a folded shirt into the box. "It's okay, Daniel. I understand. You did what you thought was best." He hesitated, then said softly, "I love you, Mom. I love you too." It wasn't the confrontation I had imagined. There was no shouting, no bitterness, just a quiet, aching understanding. The turning point wasn't a fight or a harsh word. It was the realization that sometimes love doesn't look like we expect. Sometimes it's letting go. Sometimes it's stepping back, even when your heart wants to stay. The day I moved out, Noah waved at me from the doorway. Daniel gave me a brief, tight hug. Claire nodded politely. I left without anger. I left with tears, yes, but also with a strange, gentle acceptance. That day, I realized that families are complicated, love is complicated, and sometimes the hardest part of love is knowing when to step away. After I moved back into my small apartment, the first few days were the hardest. The silence was different here. It wasn't heavy with tension like at Daniel's house. It was emptier, lonelier. My home felt smaller, quieter, and yet I slowly began to breathe again. I spent the first morning unpacking the essentials, clothes, dishes, and a few framed photos of Daniel and Noah. Each photo reminded me of the life I had shared with them, a life full of love, patience, and countless small joys. I thought about Daniel constantly. I wondered if he regretted being silent. I wondered if Noah missed me. And yes, I wondered about Claire, too, if she truly understood how much her words had hurt. But I also realized something important. I had done nothing wrong. My love for my family had always been genuine. My intentions had always been pure. And sometimes that's enough. The next week, I called Daniel. I didn't want to bring up the move or any tension. I just wanted to hear his voice. "Hi, Mom," he said, smiling softly over the phone. "Hi, Daniel," I replied. "How's Noah?" "He's good," he said. "He asked about you yesterday." My heart lifted. "Oh, really?" "Yes, he wanted to show me the blocks he built, and then he said he wished you were there too." I smiled, holding back tears. Even after everything, the bond remained. The love remained. It had not been erased by silence or by distance or by change. Over the next few weeks, I focused on rebuilding my own routine. I walked in the mornings, cooked for myself, and even started volunteering at the local community center. It was small, simple work, helping children with homework, reading stories to the little ones, but it reminded me that life could be meaningful even without being in someone else's home. Then, one Sunday, Daniel and Noah came to visit. Claire stayed home that day. I opened the door and saw my son and grandson standing there. Noah ran into my arms immediately. Daniel smiled softly, a little shy, but relieved, I think. "Hi, Mom," Daniel said quietly. "Hi, sweetheart," I whispered. We spent the day together. We laughed, we played with blocks, we talked about small things like the weather and the cartoons Noah liked. There was no tension, no silent walls between us, just family. That visit repeated over time. Slowly, a rhythm returned. I learned to respect Claire's space. She learned, I think, to appreciate my love and my presence, even if it was in small doses. Through it all, I realized something profound. Families aren't perfect. They aren't always easy. Sometimes love means stepping back. Sometimes love means letting someone make mistakes, even if it hurts you. I forgave Claire in my heart, not because I had to, but because carrying anger only made the emptiness heavier. I forgave Daniel for his silence because I understood how difficult it must have been for him to balance his love for me with his love for his wife. And I forgave myself, too. I forgave myself for expecting things to stay the same, for expecting my love alone to keep the family intact. In the quiet of my apartment, I began to write letters, not to send, but to release the emotions that had weighed on me for months. I wrote about the mornings I had spent making breakfast, the nights rocking Noah to sleep, the laughter and tears, and all the small moments that made life rich. Writing helped me see the truth. Love doesn't always look like we expect. It doesn't always come with recognition or gratitude. Sometimes love is quiet, patient, and resilient. Sometimes love is letting go and trusting that the bond you have built will survive even at a distance. Months passed. Daniel continued to visit. Noah grew bigger. Claire, I realized, had softened in her own way. We didn't always see eye to eye, but we respected each other's roles in Daniel and Noah's lives. One evening, Daniel called. "Mom, Noah drew a picture for you. Can we come by tomorrow?" I smiled so wide my cheeks ached. "Of course," I said. The next day, they arrived. Noah ran into my arms again, proudly holding a crayon drawing. Daniel stood beside him, quietly smiling. For a moment, I saw the family I had always hoped to be part of. Not exactly the way I imagined, but still full of love. As I tucked Noah into bed that night, I whispered, "I love you, sweetie." He looked at me with those big, trusting eyes and said, "I love you too, Grandma." I held him close, and in that quiet moment, I realized that love endures. It survives distance, silence, and even misunderstandings. It changes shape, but it never disappears. That night, I went to bed feeling lighter than I had in months. I had learned something important. Life is full of shifts and surprises, some painful, some beautiful, but the heart can adjust. The heart can heal, and the heart can always hold on to love even when circumstances change. I understood now that family is not about possession. It's not about control. It's about connection. It's about showing up, caring deeply, and letting each person grow in their own way, even if that growth means stepping back. And for the first time in a long while, I felt at peace. The days that followed were gentle. Life settled into a rhythm that felt natural, even if it was different from what I had imagined. I still miss the old days, our dinners together, Noah's laughter filling the apartment, Daniel and I talking late into the night. But I had learned that missing something doesn't mean it's gone forever. Sometimes, when I sit in my small living room, I think about that day when Claire first told me I should move out. I remember the hurt, the silence, the feeling of being invisible in my own family. And I also remember the moment I chose to respond with quiet understanding instead of anger. That decision changed everything. I realized that family is rarely perfect. It is messy, complicated, and full of small heartbreaks, but it is also resilient. Love doesn't always show up the way we expect. Sometimes it is gentle, sometimes it is quiet, sometimes it waits patiently until the right moment. Daniel continues to visit. Noah runs into my arms with the same joy in his eyes. Claire has softened, and while our relationship is not what I had first dreamed, it is honest, respectful, present. I've learned to find peace in the little moments, a laugh shared with my grandson, a quiet cup of tea with Daniel, a phone call to check in. These moments may not be grand, but they are real. They are lasting. They are love in its truest form. Looking back, I see that the pain I felt wasn't a punishment. It was a lesson, a reminder that we cannot control other people, only our own hearts, that letting go does not mean giving up, that love sometimes asks us to step back so that it can breathe, grow, and survive. I forgive Claire for her words. I forgive Daniel for his silence. And most importantly, I forgive myself for expecting life to stay the same. I gave love freely, and love remains. When I close my eyes at night, I feel gratitude. Gratitude for my son, who became a man I am proud of. Gratitude for my grandson, who teaches me joy every day. Gratitude for the lessons life gives us, even when they come wrapped in sorrow. And I hope, if anyone is listening to this story, that you understand something I've come to know. Family is not about control. Family is about connection. Family is about showing up, loving sincerely, and allowing life to unfold even when it doesn't go as planned. I have learned to step back, to respect boundaries, and to cherish the moments we share. And in that quiet acceptance, I have found a kind of peace I never thought possible. Even when life changes, even when love is challenged, even when silence speaks louder than words, the heart remembers, and the heart endures. Because love, in the end, is patient, gentle, and always enough.